أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله الذي له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وله الحمد في الآخرة وهو الحكيم الخبير والصلاة والسلام على المبعوث إلى كافة الورى بشيرا ونذيرا وداعيا إلى الله بإذنه وسراجا منيرا بالقاسم محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
وعلى أهل بيته أئمة الهدى ومصابيح الدجى الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم واتل عليهم نبأ ابني آدم بالحق صلوا على محمد وآل محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Respected elders, brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Last night we looked at the story of Nabi Saleh ala nabiyina wa alihi wa alayhi salam, and we related it to the vice that is hasad. And during the process of our examination of the story of Nabi Saleh, we found that there's a difference between envy and jealousy on the one hand and hasad and ghibta on the other. With regard to jealousy, there is a feeling of resentment and bitterness towards someone who possesses something, or they have some perceived advantage, or they have some achievements. Whereas with envy, it is looking at someone and desiring something that they have. As for ghibta and hasad, the difference there is that with hasad, the person wishes that blessing to be removed from them, whereas ghibta is a sense of admiration for that possession that the person has. Then we looked at the whole idea about the effects that this has on a person. And we saw that in fact it has many effects on a person, from physical effects to psychological ones to spiritual ones, and even the distortion of reality itself. Because then a person is looking at that holder of that blessing in a different light, not in the way that reality has it, but in a way that they are changing virtues into vices. They are looking at them and trying to just point out their weaknesses, not looking at their strong points at all. Then we went on to look at the causes of hasad, and we said that there are a number of causes that we can point to. Some of them are more at the superficial level. So for example, we looked at causes such as hatred for the other person. Another cause was feeling superior, because the person doesn't want that other person to be higher than them. And so they are seen in the society as somehow being lower than them. But then we also looked at inferiority complex as well. Because the other person is rising and getting higher and improving, we don't want that to happen, because we feel we are unable to progress ourselves. And so again, we feel jealous towards that person. So inshallah, this was a quick summary of where we got to last night. Tonight inshallah, we will complete our discussion on jealousy and hasad by examining the following 4 questions. First of all, how does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alert us to the dangers of hasad in the Quran? Secondly, what lessons do we learn about hasad from the story of Habil and Qabil? Thirdly, what does the Quran teach us about being tested with both difficulties in life and the blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us? And what are the implications of this for our duties in our daily lives? And finally, how can we stop feeling hasad? Inshallah, we will begin our examination of these questions with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So with regard to the first question, that how does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala draw our attention to the dangers of hasad in His holy book? Well, Allah does this in a number of ways. One of them is by alerting us to the fact that the very first sin that was ever committed, in fact the very first rebellion against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, was the result of hasad. Of course, I'm referring to the incident of when Allah commanded Iblis to do sajda in front of Nabi Adam, and Iblis refused to do that. Now, of course, often when we look at this story, we relate it to the whole concept of takabbur and arrogance, and therefore we say that the very first sin is takabbur, because that is true. The very first sin was that which happened when Iblis refused to prostrate before Adam, and Aba wastakbara wa kana min al-kafirin, as the verse tells us. He was arrogant and he refused, and he was one of the disbelievers. So yes, it is true and it's correct to say that the first sin was takabbur, because Iblis manifested that feeling, that ability to have this takabbur into action. When it is something that transforms into action, then yes, it is a sin. He says, Ana khayrun min, I am better than him. I am better than Adam. Why should I prostrate before him? Of course, this was a very warped logic, because he was using a form of qiyas, a form of analogy, in order to compare himself with Nabi Adam, which was completely invalid anyway. Who's to say that just because he's made out of this smokeless fire, that now he becomes better than Nabi Adam, who's made out of clay? Anyway, that is a topic for another time, that actually the whole reasoning was totally void and invalid from the first step. But in any case, let's say that Iblis refused to prostrate before Nabi Adam out of takabbur. It was the first sin because it was manifested in action. It wasn't just in himself. However, although we can say that the first sin was takabbur, we can also look at the catalyst for this first sin. What was it that preempted Iblis's takabbur to form in the first place? It was jealousy. Because when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had created Nabi Adam and had made him this very distinguished creation of his, this is when Iblis began to have these feelings. This is because of that jealousy and that hasad he had because of this new creation. That jealousy, in fact, jealousy in general leads to so many different sins. And it can lead to many, many different types of transgressions against Allah. It's the same thing that happened with Iblis. The original, if you like, catalyst was that jealousy that led to him manifesting the first sin in the form of takabbur, when he says, Ana khayrun min, I am better than him, and he refuses to prostrate before Nabi Adam. So we see therefore that the first way that Allah alerts us to the dangers of jealousy and hasad is by narrating the story of the very first rebellion against Allah, and that is the rebellion of Iblis against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. From this story now, what is the grave danger that Allah tells us about? Not only was it the cause of the first rebellion, but also look at the repercussions it had. Where was Iblis? Before this jealousy took place, Iblis was with the angels. We are told by none other than Mawla Amirul Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Iblis worshipped Allah for 6,000 years. He says this we read this in Nahj Balagha. And of course we don't know, are those years of the dunya or years of the akhirah? If they are years of the dunya, then it is a great long period of time anyway. If it's the years of the akhirah, then it is even longer. So, he was with the angels worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but then look what this jealousy does to him. Where does it end up being? It ends up being with Iblis being outcast from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, becoming the most despised of Allah's creation. Look where he was, look where he ended up. Why? Because of hasad. He was with the angels, he becomes the most despised, outcast being that was ever created because of this vice, which is hasad. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So that's one way that Allah points us to the dangers of hasad in the Quran. A second way that Allah does this is by telling us of a very moving story of a father and a son. In this story, we are told that it was hasad that eventually led to the father becoming blind because of his grieving for his son. I am of course referring to the story of Nabi Yaqub ala nabiyina wa alihi wa alayhi salam and Nabi Yusuf ala nabiyina wa alihi wa alayhi salam. So you all know the story. How does this result from hasad? Well, the brothers of Nabi Yusuf, they felt so jealous because of the love of their father to their brother Yusuf that they devised a plot. This jealousy led them to come up with this idea of taking their brother Yusuf away from their father and then lying to their father that he's been eaten by this wolf when really they had thrown him in this cistern, in this well. Then Nabi Yusuf is sold to those slaves, he goes to Egypt, and him and his father are separated for many, many years. All of this happens because of what? Because of hasad. Because of the jealousy that the brothers had for the love of Nabi Yaqub for his son Nabi Yusuf. It led to such repercussions to the extent that because of that long separation between Nabi Yaqub and Nabi Yusuf, that Nabi Yaqub actually lost his sight out of grieving for his son. So now we have at least these two incidents. The incident of Iblis, the very first rebellion, result of hasad. We have a great prophet losing his eyesight and grieving, both him and his son, grieving for one another for many, many years because of hasad. A third way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about this is a very important story that we read in the Quran, and that is the story of the sons of Nabi Adam ala nabiyina wa alihi wa alayhi salam. But before I go to this story, there's a joke that I came across which I'd like to share with you all, because it actually tells us something very important that we have just been discussing as well, and that is hasad knows no boundaries when it comes to who it attacks. It could be regular people, it could be friends, it could be colleagues, and as we saw, it could even be between brothers. But not just that, it can be even between a husband and wife. Let me illustrate this with a very amusing anecdote that I came across the other day. So there was a husband and wife. They are walking along the beach together. Now the husband sees that there's this lamp that is jutting out of the sand. So he comes to this lamp, he picks it up, and of course he rubs it. Now, what happens usually in these fairy stories when people rub certain lamps? Of course a genie appears. This genie says to him that as a reward for releasing me from this lamp, I give you, how many wishes? It's always 3 wishes, right? I give you 3 wishes. But this tale has a specific turn to it. He says that I give you 3 wishes, but know that whatever you ask for, your wife will receive double. So this man, he doesn't give that much thought, and he immediately, hardly without thinking, he says, "Genie, give me the best sports car." So the genie clicks its fingers, and all of a sudden the man is sitting in this wonderful, brand new, really expensive sports car. He's very happy with this result. But then he looks towards his wife. What does he see? The genie had said, whatever I give you, I will give her double. He sees her sitting in a sports car just like his, but next to that sports car is another one. So she has 2 sports cars, and of course he's very jealous about this. So then immediately he says that, right, Genie, I want $1 million. Genie clicks his fingers, and that sports car that he was sitting in all of a sudden becomes filled with these $100 bills. He's very happy, but then he looks towards his wife, and he sees that both of her sports cars have been filled with $100 bills. So she has $2 million. So now he is so jealous. He's looking at her with those green, envious eyes. And he's had enough. So he says that, Genie, I want you to beat me half to death. I'll give you a few moments for that to sink in. Because whatever he wishes, his wife will get double. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So in any case, that tells us that hasad knows no boundaries between father and son, husband and wife. But now let's look at that second question, and that is, what does the story of Habil and Qabil tell us about this whole concept of hasad? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Before I go into the actual story itself, there's often a commonly asked question about Habil and Qabil, or Cain and Abel as they are known in English. Qabil is Cain and Habil is Abel. And that question is the following: that whom did they marry? How were future generations created? Because there were only 4 people on the face of the earth at that time: Nabi Adam, Hawa, Habil and Qabil. So where were the wives? How did we come into existence? What is the answer to this question? Now, of course, this is a question that has been discussed a lot by many scholars over the years. But we can say that the best answer is what we find in the traditions of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. When we look at the traditions, we find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had sent a female jinn to Qabil. We are even told that her name was Johanna. So this female jinn became the mate of Qabil, and that's who he married. As for Habil, we read that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends for Habil a female hawra, a female creature of paradise, and he weds her, and that female hawra becomes his mate. And so when we look at these traditions, we learn how future generations came about, even though initially there were only those 4 people on the face of the earth. It's because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provided for Habil and Qabil through these miraculous ways, these mates, and that's how they procreated and future generations came into existence. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So now let's have a look at the story itself and see what we learn about hasad from this very important story. Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had told Nabi Adam to appoint who to be his successor? Not Qabil. Qabil was the older son. He tells him that appoint Habil to be your successor. the younger son. Now when Nabi Adam does this and he informs Qabil, Qabil becomes very jealous. This again will see the repercussions of this awful destructive vice called hasad. He becomes very jealous and he says to his father that I am older than him and I am more worthy than him to be appointed as your successor. Nabi Adam responds to him that, look, this is not my wish, it's the wish of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he has appointed Habil because of his qualifications. It's not that Allah just, does things just like that without wisdom, without justice. It's because of his qualifications that Habil has been appointed by myself, because Allah wanted me to appoint him as my successor. So now, the jealousy begins to kick in. Nabi Adam tells Qabil that, look, if you don't believe me or you think I'm mistaken, then do this. Why don't you and your brother make an offering to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And then Allah will choose which of these offerings that He wishes, and then that will make it very clear that who does He want to be my successor. So they agree. And now they want to make an offering to Allah. Now, Qabil was a farmer. So what does he do? He selects some very hard grains of wheat. And he presents this to be the offering to Allah. What does Habil do? Habil, he was a shepherd. He chooses the fattest ram of his flock, and he presents this to be his offering to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not just the items, but also the intention. Qabil, when he presents this meager few grains of hard wheat, his intention is not to please Allah, neither to please his father. He just presents them like that. But Habil, his intention is to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So now what happens? Here we have a difference of opinion as to how Allah actually chooses the right offering. According to one view, there is this ceremonial fire. And that ceremonial fire consumes that ram of Habil. So when it consumes that ram, it is made very clear that it is Habil's offering that has been accepted, and it is Habil who should be the successor of Nabi Adam. From another view though, both of them, they placed their offerings on top of a mountain, and then a bolt of lightning struck that ram of Habil, and this is how it became evident that Habil should be the successor of Nabi Adam. In any case, whatever the case might be, it was Habil's offering that was accepted. So now, Qabil becomes even more jealous. You see how jealousy is playing the ultimate role in what happens next. He becomes jealous, he becomes enraged, and he starts to think, what can he do about this? Now, at this stage, Shaitan comes into the story. Here we have a very important lesson. That jealousy, it causes us to have all of those weaknesses that I discussed yesterday. Remember all of the effects of jealousy: physical effects, psychological effects, spiritual effects, and distortion of reality. So now, because now Qabil is in this weak state, Shaitan exploits this weakness even more. Shaitan starts to do waswasa, starts to whisper in his ear, and he tells him that, you know what about when you and your brother have children? How are your future progeny going to look at this whole incident of the successorship of your father and the offering that was accepted? All your future progeny, they are going to be taunted, because your brother's children, they are always going to gloat as to what happened. Your progeny, they will always have to hear that, you know what, it was your ancestor, it was your uncle, it was Habil who was the successor of your father. It was Habil's offering that was accepted. And all your future progeny are gonna have to put up with this. Why don't you kill him? Because then you will be the successor of your father, and your future generations will not have to hear all of this gloating. So now he realizes this is what he must do. He plots and he grabs a rock, and then he smashes the head of his brother with this rock and he kills him. So this is what happens to the story. Now, let's look at the verses of the Quran. Like I said in the very first lecture, that we will do tadabbur over the verses of the Quran to see how we can increase our value, just like the month of Ramadan increased its value by having the Quran placed in it. We will inshallah increase our value and worth by drawing the Quran into our personal containers, which is our hearts. Let's now turn to the verses of the Quran and see what lessons we can draw from this story. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So when we look at this story, it is narrated in Surah Ma'idah chapter 5 verses 27 to 30. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts off by telling us this verse that I recited at the beginning of this lecture. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. وَاتْلُ عَلَيْهِمْ نَبَأَ ابْنَيْ آدَمَ بِالْحَقِّ. So, O Prophet, relate to them the true account of Adam's two sons. Then the verse goes on to tell us, إِذْ قَرَّبَا قُرْبَانًا فَتُقُبِّلَ مِنْ أَحَدِهِمَا وَلَمْ يُتَقَبَّلْ مِنَ الْآخَرِ. So then what happened is, when the two of them made an offering, the offering of one was accepted and the offering of the other wasn't accepted. قَالَ لَأَقْتُلَنَّكَ. So one of them, meaning Qabil, says that I swear I will kill you. قَالَ إِنَّمَا يَتَقَبَّلُ اللَّهُ مِنَ الْمُتَّقِينَ. The other one says that Allah only accepts, meaning this is Habil saying, Allah only accepts from the muttaqeen, those who have taqwa, those who are God-wary. Now, let's look at this. What is this telling us in terms of the lessons that we need to derive? It's telling us that when we feel hasad, we should introspect. We should look at ourselves. Look what Habil is saying. He's saying that Allah only accepts from the muttaqeen, from those who have taqwa. This is what we need to do. Not focus on the other side, but focus on ourselves. In fact, when we look at this, we are told in that story that actually Qabil's intention wasn't correct. It wasn't sincere. Nor was his action, the offering that he gave. What was that? A few meager, hard grains of wheat. Neither the intention nor the action was correct. Instead of Qabil trying to reform himself, trying to improve himself and introspecting and looking at himself, he tried to focus on his brother Habil, tried to put the blame on him. This is telling us that we mustn't do that. We must introspect and look at ourselves, not on the other person. For indeed the solution lies with us, not with the other side. The problem is with us, in our hearts. And therefore we must focus on that, just like we learn from this verse. Then in verse 28, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, لَإِن بَسَطْتَ إِلَيَّ يَدَكْ لِتَقْتُلَنِي مَا أَنَا بِبَاسِطٍ يَدِيَ إِلَيْكَ لِأَقْتُلَكَ. Allahu Akbar. He says that, this is Habil telling Qabil, he says that even if you extend your hand to kill me, I will not extend my hand to kill you. What is happening here, and what lesson do we gain from this? Well, the lesson we gain from this is that when somebody feels hasad against us, they feel jealous of us, we should not counter that with something wrong. If they are doing something wrong because they want that blessing from us to be removed, we always have to perform our duty. We cannot retaliate with something wrong. We cannot do what they are doing to us. Two wrongs don't make a right. Just like Habil is telling his brother, even if you kill me, even if you want to try and kill me, I won't try and kill you. This is a massive lesson for us. Inni akhafu Allah Rabbal Alameen. I am fearful of Allah, the Lord of all realms. This should be our position as well. That even if you feel jealous towards me, I am fearful of Allah. And I will just do my duty. And Allah will help me to protect myself from your jealousy. And He will inshaAllah counter in the best possible way. So now, in verse 30 now, let's have a look at the last part of this story. What Allah tells us in these beautiful verses. فَطَوَّعَتْ لَهُ نَفْسُ قَتْلَ أَخِيهِ فَقَتَلَهُ. Allah tells us that so his soul aided him. His soul allowed him to kill him. And so he killed him. What is this telling us? It is a disease of our soul. فَطَوَّعَتْ لَهُ نَفْسُ. It's his soul aided him to kill his brother. It's no good us blaming anyone else but ourselves. We must blame our nafs. It is a disease of our soul. Once we recognize that and acknowledge that, we are already a long way there towards resolving our hasad. If we don't acknowledge that we have this problem with our soul in the first place, then we are really deceiving ourselves. We are really not focusing on ourselves but on others. Focus on ourselves. Why fill our hearts with negativity about what others have, when really we need to realize that it is something that we need to remove from our hearts. And then he goes on to say, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, فَأَصْبَحَ مِنَ الْخَاسِرِينَ. And so he became one of the losers. So you see here that we learn from this story that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us the one who has hasad, he will be of the khasireen. He will be the loser. So we must bear this in mind and always realize that hasad can rear its ugly head even amongst the closest of relatives, even amongst brothers, father and son, husband and wife. And also it can lead to the worst crimes. Like we saw, it led to the first rebellion that ever took place in history. It led to a father going blind. And it led to one brother killing another. And in fact, this killing was what? It was the first ever crime on the earth. So we have hasad being the cause of the first rebellion in history and the first ever crime on the face of the earth. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So this is how Allah alerts us to the dangers of hasad in the Quran. Now let's have a look at that third question that we wanted to try and ask ourselves, and that was, what does the Quran tell us about being tested, both in terms of difficulties that we face and in terms of the blessings that we are given? Because I've said quite a lot about being tested. Let's explore this in a few more minutes, inshaAllah. In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that He tests us in both ways, both with blessings and with hardships. So for example, in Surah Anfal, verse number 28, He tells us, وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّمَا أَمْوَالُكُمْ وَأَوْلَادُكُمْ فِتْنَةٌ. Know that your possessions and your children are a fitna for you. What does fitna for you mean here? Fitna here means trial. Your possessions and your children, all of your blessings, we can say, are a trial for you. Now, you see, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we shouldn't think that just because someone has a blessing and now we're feeling hasad towards that person, that they have got it made, they are so lucky. Yes, they have been blessed with something that you really would like. But remember always that that is a test for them. Are they going to discharge that trial? Are they going to pass it with flying colors or not? So Allah tests us with blessings as well as with hardships. If we bear this in mind, it helps us to overcome feelings of hasad. That person has all of this, but don't think they have it all made. No, it's a trial for them. In fact, those of you here who know Persian will probably recognize this very famous Persian proverb. Har ke bamash bish, barfash bishtar. What this means is that the one whose roof is bigger has more snow to shovel off it. What does that mean? It means that the one whose roof is bigger, if you imagine a house, a very big house with a big roof, flat roof, this is implying the blessings that somebody might have. The bigger someone's roof is, it implies they are in a better financial situation. The more blessings they have, we can say. But what happens when it snows? When it snows, all of this snow is going to fall onto that roof, isn't it? And if nothing is done about this snow, it's going to become very weighty for the roof, and eventually the roof is going to collapse. So it's telling us, this proverb, that whoever has, the bigger the roof somebody has, the more snow they have to shovel off it. If they don't want that roof to collapse, meaning the bigger responsibilities they have on their shoulders. The more blessings, the bigger the responsibilities you have to discharge those blessings, to account for them in the correct way. In fact, look at the Quran. Fir'aun, what didn't he have? He had everything that the world he could possibly wish for. But how did he react? He did not pass this trial in the correct way. And therefore, we should always ask ourselves, what is our duty? It doesn't mean that we stop going after these things. No, blessings are there for Allah to give us, for us to try and attain ourselves as well. Because if we don't do anything, if we don't go after after what is best for us, then we are also going to be held accountable for our potential. Our potential is also a big blessing. So don't think that, okay, whatever extra things I have, I'm going to be held accountable and therefore I shouldn't go after them. The less I have, the less I will be accountable for in the day of resurrection. No. Allah will also hold you accountable for the potential you have. Why didn't you make the most of your potential? So how do we get the balance right? The way to get the balance right is that, yes, let's strive our hardest, make the most of the potential, try to attain whatever we can, but always for the pleasure of Allah. That's the key criterion. If we attain things and we gain blessings with this in mind, that is for the pleasure of Allah, we're going to use it in the way that Allah is happy for us to use it, then fine. We will always have an answer on the day of resurrection. We will be able to discharge our responsibilities properly. We will be able to shovel that snow off our big roofs in the correct manner. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. But also we are told that Allah tests us with hardships as well, not just with blessings. For example, in Surah Baqarah, verse number 155, Allah tells us that He tests us with hardships as well. وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوءِ وَنَقْصٍ مِنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. You will be tested, Allah tells us, with the measure of 5 things. With a measure of fear, and of hunger, and of a decrease in your wealth, in lives, and in your possessions. Allah will test you in all of these ways. So now, when we look at this, we realize that Allah has these 2 ways of testing us, whether He gives us or He withholds from us. We are always being tried and tested. In fact, even now, we are being tested, at least by means of one of these five. Which one? Hunger, of course. But at least we know that there is this iftar coming. And perhaps some of us know exactly how many minutes it's going to come and how many seconds it's going to come. But what about those who don't even have this hope? Those who don't even know where their iftar is coming from, where their next meal is coming from. Allah tells us He's going to test us in these ways. So now, when we look at this, we see that actually there is a very important system in place. Allah places blessings and hardships in a very sophisticated system of interconnections. By that I mean Allah gives and He withholds. He gives and He withholds. And by doing that, He is testing both sides. The one He has given to and the one who He has withheld from. So, again, let's look at a situation. Ahmad and Zainab have all of these blessings, for example. They have knowledge, they have beauty, they have wealth, they have experience on their side, they have good health. Aren't they going to be tested with all of these? They are going to be tested by all their blessings. What about us? It's also a test for us because we are looking at Ahmad and Zainab. How are we going to react? It's a very sophisticated system of interconnections. Everything becomes connected. Your blessing is a test for me. My blessing is a test for you. My blessing is a test for me as well. Your blessing is a test for you as well. Everything is interconnected. All we can do is perform our duties towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the best possible way. Imam Jafar Sadiq salawatullah wa salamu alayhi, he puts this so beautifully in the following words. He says that there is not any withholding or releasing except that for Allah there are three things. There is a wish, there is a decision, and there is a trial. So what he says is Allah does qabd and bast. It means He withholds and He releases. He withholds and He releases all the time. It's happening every single moment of our existence. Qabd and bast. As He does that, there are three things. There is His wish, there is His decision, and there is the trial. The wish and decision is in Allah's hands. He is wishing this to happen. Just like we said yesterday, it's a decision that He makes out of wisdom and justice. But there is an overarching purpose to this. And that is the trial. The trial for us. He's testing us. When He does bust, meaning He releases, are we going to be grateful for that? Are we going to share this? What about when He does qabd and He withholds? Again, are we going to be patient? Are we going to have faith in Him? Are we going to have trust in Him? Continuously there is this trial. Now just a point about trial. You know, we've been speaking a lot about tests and trials. We shouldn't think that it's just a type of assessment for Allah to see our faith. How good are we in our faith? How good are we in tawakkul and trusting in Allah, in patience? No, it's not just that. Trials also have a benefit for us. Those of us who are teachers will know this. We don't just have assessment for our students, for us to know how good they are, but they are also a means for them to grow, to develop more. Trials are a form of tarbiyah for us. He tests us and He trials, not so that He wants some sort of assessment to be carried out. That He knows anyway, without any need for any trial. But also He wants us to develop, to grow, to come out of our comfort zones, to be stretched, and to reach new heights. Without these trials and tribulations, we will not attain that. Sallu ala Muhammad wa Muhammad. And finally, the fourth fourth question that we want to try and answer tonight is, how can we stop feeling hasad? First of all, we can look at what we have been discussing tonight and yesterday. Look at the stories in the Quran, how Allah alerts us to the dangers of hasad. Remember, we said Allah alerts us to the dangers of hasad by telling us it was the first ever rebellion, the first ever crime on the earth. It can happen between anyone, even the closest of relations, husband and wife, father and son, brothers. It can happen. He's telling us, beware of this. This is the first thing that can help us stop feeling hasad. Also, we saw in these stories, we should focus on ourselves. We should focus on how we can remove this from our souls. It is something that is within us. The solution is within us, the problem is within us. Not look at what the other side has got. The other side will be accountable for it. Let them deal with it. Let us deal with our problems. Also, we saw that is something that really we are all going to be tried for. So that's the first thing. Look at the stories that tell us about this, the fact that it is something that can happen to the closest of people. It can lead to the most detrimental implications. The outcasting of some creature that was closest to or very close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala amongst the angels. It can cause blindness of a father. It can cause one brother to kill another. The second way that we can stop hasad is by counting our blessings. Let's be grateful for what we do have. Let me ask you this. Can you ever be truly grateful if you have hasad? This is something that you can perhaps think about later on as well. Can you ever be truly shakir if you are hasid? Think about it. You can't be truly grateful to Allah for His blessings if you feel jealous towards someone or some people. So count our blessings. Thirdly, when we feel hasad, we should bear in mind that it is, of course, in the attributes of Allah, who He gives to. So, the third solution is to reflect over the attributes of Allah, especially His wisdom, His justice and His grace. This is what we discussed yesterday. That because Allah has given to Ahmad and Zainab, we must reflect over this. Not question why has Allah given to Ahmad and Zainab, but that Allah has given to Ahmad and Zainab out of His wisdom, out of His justice and out of His grace. When we appreciate Allah has these amazing attributes and He does everything as a result of His infinite wisdom and justice and grace, it helps us to stop feeling hasad. And fourth and finally, a very practical thing that we can all do inshallah from tonight onwards, and that is something which is very difficult, by the way. It's not easy, but to pray for the person that we feel jealous of. Very difficult sometimes, but it becomes easier and easier the more we do it. These are not my words, they are the words of Imam Mohammed al-Baqir salawatullah wa salamu alayhi. He says that the quickest prayer, the quickest dua, and the most successful one to be accepted is the dua by a believing brother for his fellow believing brother in his absence. So the quickest dua that is successful in terms of being granted is the dua by a believing brother for his fellow believing brother in his absence. Then he goes on to say, he should begin by praying for his fellow believer. Okay, so we start off by praying for our fellow brothers and sisters, and then he says, what happens when we do that? He says, when we do that, the angel who has been appointed to take care of this task, the angel says, Ameen. The angel wants this prayer to be accepted. But then the angel says, and for you there is double of what you have asked for that person. Not only does the angel want that dua to be accepted, but that angel prays that you receive double of what you have asked for that fellow brother and sister. So let's inculcate this in our practice, inshallah. When we feel hasad, let's pray for that person. Let's increase in our ghibta. Remember yesterday we were talking about admiration, not jealousy. And inshallah, pray for that person that he gets more, that he's able to respond to the blessings by discharging his responsibilities in a true possible way. And inshallah we will receive that, not just that, but we will receive double if it's in our best interest and if we have been sincere in our dua. So as a summary today, we looked and we completed our discussion on hasad. Tomorrow we'll start a new topic altogether. And we continued following what we learned yesterday from the story of Nabi Saleh by looking at how Allah alerts us to the dangers of hasad in the Quran. He does that in at least 3 ways. By pointing to the first ever rebellion, by pointing to the father that lost his eyesight because of the jealousy of his sons, the sons of Nabi Yaqub when they had jealousy towards Nabi Yusuf because of the love that Nabi Yaqub had towards Nabi Yusuf. And by means of the story of Habil and Qabil. Then we also saw that with regard to this whole topic, we looked at how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala portrays this story for us. There were a number of lessons we learned from this story. We must focus on ourselves, not reciprocate jealousy with evil, and we must try to reform ourselves. Then we looked at how Allah teaches us about dealing with hardships and trials in the Quran. He tests us, He tries us. There is an interconnecting, very sophisticated system of relationships that takes place between all of us in society, whether we are receiving or we are being withheld from with regard to certain blessings. Finally, we looked at the possible ways that we can stop feeling hasad by looking at the stories, learning from the examples, and looking at the whole area of our blessings, being grateful, reflecting over Allah's attributes. He does everything out of wisdom, out of justice, and out of His grace. And finally, by praying sincerely for our fellow brothers and sisters. Let's pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Oh Allah, hasten the appearance of the 12th of the Imam. Oh Allah, bring relief to all those who are facing difficulties in their lives. Oh Allah, enable us to live and die according to the teachings of the Quran and Ahlul Bayt. Oh Allah, enable us to live and die with the wilayah of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Oh Allah, bless this center and all those who frequent it. Oh Allah, enable us to remove all of these vices from our character, including this very destructive vice of hasad. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
السلام عليك يا عبد الله. السلام عليك يا رسول الله.